Have you ever felt like what you have isn't enough? Like your resources, your energy, your faith just won't stretch far enough to meet the need? That's where this story begins. On a hillside with thousands of hungry people, and just one small meal in the hands of a boy who chose to believe that maybe, just maybe, what little he had could still make a difference. The day had been long. Jesus had been teaching a massive crowd, more than 5,000 men, not even counting the women and children who followed too. They were gathered on a grassy hillside, a sea of humanity hanging on his every word. There was something different about him, a sense of authority, yet a deep well of compassion. He saw their sicknesses and healed them. He saw their confusion and taught them. He didn't just see a crowd. He saw individuals, each with their own story, their own hurts, and their own needs. As he looked out over the thousands of faces turned toward him, his heart was filled with a profound compassion. These people were like sheep without a shepherd, and he felt a deep personal responsibility for them, not just for their souls, but for their tired, hungry bodies as well. But now, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the valley. The air grew cooler, and a new feeling began to ripple through the multitude: hunger. Stomachs rumbled. Children began to cry for their dinner. The disciples, ever practical, saw the problem growing. They approached Jesus, a look of concern on their faces. "This is a remote place," they said, their voices laced with urgency, "and it's already getting late. Send the crowds away so they can go to the villages and buy themselves something to eat." It was a logical solution, the only one that made sense. They were out in the middle of nowhere, with no resources and a crowd the size of a small city. Then, a young boy, perhaps nudged forward by his mother or simply driven by a child's earnest heart, stepped up. He was holding his dinner. It wasn't much. Just 5 small barley loaves, the simple, flat bread of a common family, and 2 small, salted fish. It was just enough for one growing boy, a humble meal packed for a day of listening. Andrew, one of the disciples, pointed him out to Jesus almost apologetically. "Here is a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish," he said, his tone heavy with doubt. "But how far will they go among so many?" You can almost hear the unasked question hanging in the air. What good is this tiny offering in the face of such overwhelming need? It was a drop of water in a desert. But Jesus doesn't laugh. He doesn't dismiss the offering. Instead, he looks at the boy's small lunch as if it were a banquet. He sees not what it is, but what it could become. With a calm and reassuring voice, he instructs his disciples, "Have the people sit down in groups on the green grass." A wave of murmurs must have gone through the crowd, but they obeyed. The disciples organized them into groups of 50s and 100s, a sprawling patchwork of humanity seated in expectant silence. Then, Jesus took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish. He looked up to heaven, giving thanks. He blessed the food, praying over this meager meal with the same reverence he would give a king's feast. Then he broke the loaves and began giving them to the disciples to distribute. He did the same with the fish. That's when the miracle unfolded. As the disciples moved through the crowds, the baskets never emptied. Hands that had reached out with a small piece of bread were suddenly holding more. The supply didn't just last, it multiplied. Every single person in that massive crowd ate. Not just a small bite to stave off the hunger, but they ate until they were completely full. Men, women, and children were all satisfied. The initial anxiety and hunger that had filled the air was replaced by a sense of awe and quiet contentment. The disciples, who had started with nothing, were now serving an endless supply of food. When everyone had finished eating, Jesus gave another instruction. "Gather the pieces that are left over, let nothing be wasted." So the disciples went back through the crowd, and they filled 12 baskets with the broken pieces of bread and fish that were left over from the 5 small loaves. The disciples looked at the 12 full baskets, one for each of them, and the message became clear. God doesn't just meet our needs, He provides in overwhelming abundance. He takes our small, seemingly insignificant offerings, our 5 loaves and 2 fish, and He multiplies them in ways we could never imagine. That moment, that's where faith stepped in. A little boy offered what he had, not because it was enough, but because he believed Jesus could make it enough. He teaches us that what we have when placed in His hands is always more than enough. It's a reminder that our greatest abilities are nothing without Him, but our smallest contributions can change the world when we give them to Him. It's a reminder that our greatest abilities are nothing without Him, but our smallest contributions can change the world when we give them to Him. For more powerful Bible stories told with heart and clarity, subscribe to this channel, and let's keep growing together in faith, one story at a time.